Good evening and welcome to Sefer Academy's production of tonight's presentation on the King, the Lawgiver, and the Judge. I'm Dr. Stephen Pidgeon. I'm joining you here tonight on May 19th, 2022. And tonight we're going to be discussing, sorry about my delay here tonight. I ran into a number of problems. Like one of them was uninstalling everything. Well, that was kind of a dumb move on my part, but nonetheless, we are here today now. We're going to be able to present now. And so we want to be able to kind of get started with this production. You know, as we witness the failure of the West and its collapse into a new dark age, and that's really what we're seeing now, is a complete collapse of the West. And it's kind of crazy because the rest of the world sees us as committing suicide, quite frankly. And this would not be the first time in history that an empire has committed suicide. To give you an example, there was a very interesting discussion about what took place in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire back in the 19th century when Franz Joseph was the emperor of the empire, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And this empire fell apart. In particular, it had a real systemic kind of loss that took place with the murder-suicide of the son of Franz Joseph, who decided not only did he not want to be emperor, but he didn't want any more to do with life. And before he died, he took his wife's life and then killed himself. Now, this followed, of course, the Austrian Empire, and in particular, the city of Vienna, hosting a number of people that would then become instrumental in the change that took place in the 20th century. Namely, Karl Marx was one of the people hosted there. Sigmund Freud was another person hosted there. Even Adolf Hitler was hosted in Vienna for a while. And so as a consequence, Franz Joseph was required to continue to lead the empire long after he should have retired and should have given the empire over to his son, but he had no heir. And so as a consequence, he looked around and looked around and looked around until he finally found the Archduke Ferdinand, who was kind of a distant cousin, but they claimed had enough bloodline to be able to manage the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And the Archduke Ferdinand, much like Tsar Nicholas II in Russia, was going to embark on a lot of reforms inside the empire to bring in the idea of a parliament, to bring in parliamentary rule, and to bring in some other governance methods that would have resulted in more autonomy, more freedom, more self-expression among the people controlled under the empire. However, he was brutally assassinated. Both he and his wife were shot in Sarajevo in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And when this happened, this launched a retaliatory move from the Austrian-Hungarian leadership into the Baltics, and which was responded by both Serbia and Russia by putting their troops on maneuver, which caused Germany to declare war, and which launched World War I, a significant battle that ended up taking millions and millions of European lives and really redefining all of the 20th century for everyone in the world. And it all began with kind of a suicidal impulse of the leadership inside the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. At the end of that particular conflagration, we see that the Austrian-Hungarian Empire would come to an end, and there would no longer be an emperor of that empire. In fact, it wouldn't be an empire anymore at all, divided up into many, many nations. The Kaiser in Germany would lose his post. There would no longer be a Kaiser in Germany, but there would be some kind of government that would form after Germany was vanquished following the end of World War I. We already saw the end of the kingdom and the monarchy in France in 1789 with the beheading of Louis XVI. And of course, the Russian Empire under the Tsars would come to a conclusion with the overthrow of the Tsar by the Bolsheviks and ultimately the assassination and execution and dismemberment of the Tsar and his entire family in Yekaterinburg. So all of these things kind of came to an end. Now, there still remained a queen or a king in the Netherlands, still remains a king in Spain, there still remains a king or queen in the United Kingdom. But for the most part, the idea of a kingdom ruled by a king or emperor came to an end throughout most of the body of Europe. And this happened really because the societies themselves were ready to commit suicide. Now, it's my premise here that, in fact, the United States, its culture, the American culture, is now a suicidal culture. And we can see it everywhere. You can see it everywhere. You can see 107,000 deaths from fentanyl, for instance, fentanyl abuse since the beginning of the year. Suicides are up across the board for everyone. Number one taker of female life under the age of 40 in the United States, and it's quickly become the number one killer of young men in the United States. Suicide goes through the roof. In addition to the individual election to commit suicide, so we have this society also committing suicide, but more important, our government leaders are committing suicide among us when they're not launching a war against us intentionally to harm us and to otherwise remove us from the voting rolls, if you will. They are committing suicide by poking the bear in the eye, a nuclear power, with the intent of provoking a nuclear war. Well, in the middle of all of this comes a very interesting circumstance. We now have a circumstance where what's being presented before the United States is this business of selling out the sovereignty of the United States to the World Health Organization, the WHO, and giving the WHO, by means of an amended treaty, complete authority over the disposition of every American life, and particularly when it comes to the idea of health. In other words, at the discretion of the WHO, a health emergency can be declared premised upon anything, and we're back into a lockdown, we're back into wearing masks, we're back into a mandated snake bite, we're back into all of these things that we have just seemed to have just ridden out. Now, in addition to us seeking to join this treaty or to amend this treaty, Israel has now gotten on board with this treaty. Now, unfortunately for the people leading the nation, they don't understand nor do they recognize the ramifications of doing this, because what they are doing is they are giving up sovereignty. They're giving up the sovereignty of the nation. They're giving up the idea of our nation being controlled by elected officials, which we kind of gave that up a few years back anyway. But the idea that we were supposed to be ruled by democratic forces with an executive branch and a legislative branch and a judicial branch, these things are all going away. I mean, they're going to be completely gone, and it will be unelected bureaucrats from somewhere around the world deciding which businesses are going to be open, who can walk down the street, who can get on a bus, who can get in an airplane, who can travel to and fro, who can be in a public space. All of these things are going to be made on the basis of health, on a health decision, all which will be handled by a World Health Organization, which is controlled and funded by some of the largest private foundations in the world, who will be able to dictate the policy predicated upon their ability to realize surreptitious profits, unreasonably obtained, generally through market manipulation. So this is going to be a very interesting circumstance. So what is taking place right now is we're seeing the catastrophic failure of the West and a collapse into a new dark age. I was just looking at some numbers here that have come out that were published on Zero Hedge, showing that we're in 8 straight weeks of decline, that we've had massive declines in the NASDAQ, we've had massive declines in the S&P, we've had massive declines in the NYSE and on the Dow Jones Industrials, all of which are pushing right at the line now, which is going to spell depression. In other words, once we move through this line this week, by this weekend, once we push through this line this weekend, then it's headlong into the abyss. And into the abyss means a crashing and devaluing dollar, which is now underway and which has now begun. You're going to be seeing a crash of the housing prices, which also is underway. It's already begun. You're going to see a robust inflation, which is also underway. While the Biden administration claimed that we had an inflation rate of 7%, Trump claimed the inflation rate for the month of April was actually 11%, but it's going to be much higher this month. The state of Washington recently ran out of gas, and all of the gas stations began reprogramming their pumps to express a cost of gasoline per gallon up in the double digits. In other words, $10 and above. Gas is $15 a gallon in Ukraine right now, and you cannot get it. You have to wait in the line for 12 hours to get it. And so what we see is we're beginning to see now that we have this economic catastrophe unfolding, an economic fallout, an economic collapse. And with this economic collapse comes a number of things. We're approaching now a point of no return. Now, this was already published in the United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, the finance minister there, who was at least somebody willing to tell Parliament the truth, said we're looking at apocalyptic signs in the economy. That is to say, apocalyptic food shortages, apocalyptic gas shortages, apocalyptic heating shortages. In fact, it's published in the UK right now that many pensioners now have gone back to eating only one meal a day. They've gone down from 2 to 1 meal a day, and they're no longer heating their homes. Some people who are living in a cold country will get up in the morning, put on their sweater, and get on the bus where the bus is heated and ride the bus all day because they have a free pass to ride the bus all day. And they'll stay on the bus all day in order to stay warm. These are the kinds of things that are being reported in the United Kingdom. In the United States, we're seeing a massive and significant drought, the most significant drought in 1,200 years. Some of the lakes that are literally disappearing include Lake Powell, Lake Mead, the lake at Oroville, which is now a river, the Shasta, which is basically a river, Lake Powell, which is basically a river. And of course, at Lake Mead, they're finding all the dead bodies down there, and they're finding boats that have sunk, and they're finding all kinds of hidden treasures at the bottom of the lake that used to be the bottom of the lake. Unbeknownst to most people, the Colorado River is drying up. The Rio Grande is drying up. The Rio Grande, I mean, in many places, just flat dry. Even the Great Lakes are down. So no matter what the preparation may be from the federal government, we appear to be embarked on a course to commit economic, financial, and military suicide. That's what appears to be happening. And it appears to be happening in such a way that there's not going to be any recovering from it. In other words, there's not going to be anything we're going to do that's going to suddenly change the circumstances or change the events. In fact, it's my conviction that there is no one in the United States who can change the mind of our leadership at the federal government from pursuing a nuclear war with Russia. I mean, they're just going to do it. And that's just the way it is. And the only thing that's going to stop them is their total inability to do it in the event that their phone doesn't work or they can't get in their car or something like this. And which, by the way, may happen. So anyway, as we witness the failure of the West and its collapse into a new dark age, many look for a new solution. Okay, so some look for the Great Reset. Now, this Great Reset rhetoric comes out of European bankers and, of course, the children of Nazis. And so you see so much of the former, the children of Nazi leadership in power in Europe today. One of those children of a Nazi, of course, is Klaus Schwab, who is the official spokesman for the World Economic Forum, and who has told the world, all of you people are going to own nothing and like it. So as a consequence, we can see that this is going to be kind of significant, that everybody's going to supposedly like it, like the fact that we don't have a world anymore. Okay. But this was the Great Reset. Now, the Great Reset, from my point of view, was just another set of terms for an economic bailout of Deutsche Bank, which is a hopelessly mismanaged bank in Europe, and the world leading, or Europe's leading investment bank, and whose portfolio has gone sideways I don't know how many times. And they were, of course, on the verge of a total face in the ground destruction and bankruptcy here just a few years ago in 2020. And the only thing that saved their stock is the fact that Klaus Schwab came out and said, basically, we're going to steal everything from everybody else and give it to you. And what we have seen now is that you see that these governments have come out and decided that certain industries were essential and certain other industries, like the small businessman, the restaurant, the gym, et cetera, were non-essential. Now we see the finance minister in the UK begging for non-essential businesses to make a profit again. Well, I hate to say it, but, if you choke the golden goose that lays the golden eggs until all you get is diarrhea, you're not going to get a rebirth in your economy. What you're going to get is the fourth turn. You're going to get a complete harvest of the crop you have sown. So they said we're looking for a great reset. All right. Some are looking for the New World Order. Well, the New World Order is not a New World Order at all. In fact, the New World Order is really the old order. But as you might expect from people promoting the New World Order, they lie. So the title New World Order is in itself a bald-faced lie. Because when they talk about the New World Order, what they're trying to impose is the leadership of Western Rome. That's what they're trying to impose. They're trying to impose Charlemagne's Holy Roman Empire in its third iteration. So you had Western Rome in its first iteration, followed by the Holy Roman Empire under Charlemagne in its second iteration that lasted until Napoleon destroyed it. And you had its rebirth in its third iteration as the Third Reich under Adolf Hitler, which is being imposed on the whole world, quote unquote, as a new world order. Okay. But some are simply looking for a bailout. I mean, the bottom line is we hear all this rhetoric, all this fancy talk, all this discussion about this, that, and the other thing, smoke screens, a couple of flashbang lights. And the next thing you know, we're talking about a great reset, when really it's just an economic bailout of banks who still cannot manage their money. Okay. So in all of this, many ask the question, well, who shall lead us? Who shall be our guide and who shall be our king? Well, some people aren't asking for a king. Some people are asking for a president or a prime minister. Some people aren't even asking for that. Some people just want to get back over to Walmart, right? I mean, when you're talking about people asking for, is there a question in the United States, who shall be our leader? Who shall be our king? I don't think so. What we have here is a robust chant of let's go, Brandon, which Brandon is going. Brandon is going. He's doing his thing. And the thing that he is doing has no concern whatsoever about whether or not the children on infant formula are being fed. There's no concern about that. There's no concern about whether Californians are paying $7 a gallon for gas. There's no concern about whether the diesel fuel that powers all of our trucks that deliver all the food and everything else to the supermarkets, whether or not they have diesel. There's no concern for that. In fact, the Biden administration decided to shut down all new oil and gas leases because they have so little concern about whether or not there's going to be fuel to bring food to market. Okay, there's no concern about that whatsoever. What the big concern is whether or not they can keep the money laundering scheme going on in Ukraine long enough for them to achieve oligarch status. We're going to talk about that a little bit tonight, about who is an oligarch and who isn't. But in the middle of achieving oligarch status, there is no oligarch status if you're a billionaire or a multi-billionaire over a currency that has less value than the Zimbabwe dollar. Something that they don't think about because they don't concern themselves with that. They concern themselves only with the moment. Now, we saw something. So should we consider a dictatorship governed by scientists? This was discussed actually in Bertrand Russell's book, in a 1953 book, The Impact of Science on Society, when Bertrand Russell, like many others, had advocated that the scientific community should be in complete authoritarian control of society because scientists have their hands on science. And so as a consequence, because they have their hands on science, they should be the one who are making all the decisions about what's going on. Well, scientists, look, I hate to break the news to the scientists, but the scientists don't know what they're talking about. I mean, I'll give you an example. Chief scientist in the world, and probably the most brilliant man who lived from the year 2000 to the year 2010 was Al Gore. And he came out and told us categorically that by 2010, all of the ice caps will have melted and New York will be under 50 feet of water. Well, that was 12 years ago, and New York still isn't under 15 feet of water. I don't know what Al Gore was saying, but Al Gore told us at that time that the science was settled. There was no need to debate it, no need to discuss it. You needed to trust the science because the science was settled, because the International Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, in its fourth assessment, had 400 signatures that said the science is settled. Therefore, the science was settled. New York was underwater. Now, New York was underwater. Let me hear you repeat it, because this is the lie we have to tell now. New York was underwater. Therefore, climate change happened. Therefore, we're going to need to increase your taxes by 40% and criminalize your ability to exhale in order to arrest the climate change that already happened in New York in 2010 when it went under 50 feet of water. right? Okay, so scientists are never wrong, as you know. Scientists have all the answers, except they don't. They never have any answer. They have theory. They never have any answer. So should we turn over society to quote unquote the scientists? Scientists who would not even have a career at all had they not kowtowed and brown-nosed the dogma of Darwin's evolution that stemmed from Darwin's book, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the preservation of preferred races in the struggle for life, one of the most racist eugenicist doctrines ever written by anyone ever, that Darwin himself denounced before he died. If you don't kiss the backside of that idea and that ideology, you're not a scientist at all. And these are the people that we're now going to give over our country to, this dictatorship of scientists, all of whom are paying homage to whoever happens to fund their project. And we know who that might be, right? So who is the ultimate person that will be given dictatorial control should the WHO obtain the premises of this treaty that Joe Biden is planning on signing in a week? Well, that would be none other than our good friend, Bill Gates, lover of humanity. Okay, but would a dictatorship governed by scientists lead us to a greater condition of health? Let me remind you that the scientists told us lockdowns were going to prevent the transmission of the pathogen. Johns Hopkins University then published, no, it had no meaningful effect whatsoever. The scientists then put us and all of our children in face masks for 2 years. Mandatory. You're a Karen if you don't wear your face mask. This went on for 2 years, only to find out that the masks have no effect whatsoever at preventing the transmission of the pathogen. Well, I'm not going to get into the snake bite. This isn't a discussion on the snake bite, even though we know that the UK just admitted that the fatality chances are significantly higher among those who have been bitten by the serpent. Okay. How about, should we yield ourselves to the new progress in artificial general intelligence, AGI? You know, should we put a chip in our mind? Should we do this? Now, let's talk a little bit about this. Let's talk about the digital world that came in that was supposed to be such a time saver and it was going to save us all these things. You know, the young people, and I don't know how many young people are watching this, but I hope they are. But if the young people are watching this, you know, when I was a kid, we knew our phone numbers. In fact, we memorized the phone numbers of all our friends, such that if we ever got trapped on a desert road, we could find a payphone, tap out a phone number, and get a hold of one of our friends to come and save us. Now, nobody knows anybody's phone number. You're lucky if you know your own phone number because it's stored in your digital phone. We knew how to go from place to place. Sometimes we used a map, but I've driven coast to coast across the United States with no map. I've driven from Washington, D.C. to a residence in North Carolina with no map. I've driven all over the Southeast with no map. I used to drive when our band was on the road. We drive from city to city with no map, ever. No map, no GPS, no coordinates, no nothing. We just did it. And yet now, a lot of young people can't find their way home without a GPS finder. They can't find their way out of the airport. They can't find their way downtown. Unless they have their GPS on, they can't find where they're going. So I'm going to ask you, are you smarter using your digital device? Or is your digital device taking from you knowledge you should have? This is a big question, because when we talk about AGI, you know, we talked a little bit about this in theory 3 years ago. If you put on a pair of glasses and you put on a pair of glasses and you say, okay, I got my glasses on, now what? Well, these glasses are going to give me a readout in one eye that's going to give answers to any question. So if I'm talking to you in a foreign language, I've got a translator in my left eye that's telling me what you're saying. If you ask me a question, it immediately goes to Siri, or it goes to Alexa, or it goes to whoever. And your digital interface is giving you the answer to any question. And your mind, being hooked up in a chip now, has got these answers on board, but your mind doesn't. The chip does. You see? Your mind doesn't, your glasses do. Your mind doesn't, the cloud does. Your mind doesn't, AGI does. And at the end of the day, who are you with this chip in your mind? Well, your body and your mouth are functioning at a very high level because you only have to cognize the stimulus that's coming into your vision. You only need to know how to read. And I imagine they'll probably defeat that here soon. So who are you? You're just a host body for someone else's intelligence. You're a host body for someone else's intelligence. And this is the proposed transhumanism that's being set forth by, the leading entrepreneurs in the world right now, including Elon Musk, which is to implant a chip in the mind of the child, implant a chip in the mind of the working adult, to implant a chip to allow you to interface with artificial general intelligence, which is now engaged in quantum computing, roughly 1 trillion times faster than the human mind can think. Should we go into this world? If we do go into this world, what does it bring? What does it bring to you as a mere host, a uselessly eating host, which if we can replace you as a host with something else that doesn't eat uselessly, that doesn't need heat uselessly, guess what? We're going to make big progress. Should we engage in that progress in artificial general intelligence and let the quantum computers do the thinking for us? Should we surrender what is left of our autonomy to a governance of progressives who are leading us boldly into a diversified social strata of multiple genders and transhumanistic populations? There were 2 teenagers, 8th graders, who are now facing sanctions. I believe this is in Michigan. Who are now facing sanctions for sexual harassment because they failed to use the pronoun designated by a trans individual in their class. 8th graders. New York has made 31 different kinds of genders legal, and you're required to use the pronouns that somehow coordinate with that gender, right? Now, is this the end of the road? No, this isn't the end of the road. This is the beginning of the road. This isn't the end of diversification of society. This is the beginning. It's not the end. And in addition to that, the transhumanistic population is going to promote and create a huge pressure on parents. When your 1st grader comes home and says, well, Johnny and Cindy both have chips in their head, and I don't, and they can speak 22 languages and I can't. And this is the first day of 1st grade. So how am I going to keep up, Mom and Dad? And so the pressure is going to be very clear that you're not going to be able to compete in the social order unless your children are chipped, unless you too have engaged in transhumanism, unless you too have moved into AGI complete control over you, you're not going to be able to participate. Is this the progress we should be embracing as a people? Should we resort to the times of the judges of Israel, when every man was a law unto himself? Well, I don't care how you're doing it. This is how I'm doing it. I'm going to go hunker down in the woods and I'm going to live like this. Or should we clamor for a king, as did the ancient tribes in Yashar'el, in desperation to be like their neighbors? Is there in all of this even a consideration of restoring the constitutional republic of the United States? Doesn't that seem like a distant memory now? Now, it may not seem like a distant memory to those people who are in the halls of government. Well, we did the same thing today that we did yesterday, but you didn't. You didn't do the same thing you did yesterday that you did today, because today we have a group of people leading us into World War III, none of whom sought a vote, none of whom sought approval, none of whom sought anything. They just on their own went ahead and declared war against a highly armed nuclear power called Russia, and have done so without ever asking the American public whether the American public thought that Ukraine was a vital interest to the United States. No one asked. I'm not quite sure how Ukraine became a national interest to the United States, but I know how it became a national interest to the Democrats of the United States, all of whom have been engaged in extensive money laundering schemes in Ukraine. Whether you're talking about paying off Hunter Biden, or you're talking about making money in biolabs, or you're talking about making money on the backside of selling armament, or other money laundering enterprises where the money is dumped into an NGO, a non-governmental organization, which kicks back the money back to the politician funding it to begin with. It's a scheme that's been well known, been executed by the Democrats without any merit review for a long time. Great money-making plan right out of the American taxpayer's pocket. And you have little say over it, right? Okay. So the Constitution of the United States, distant memory. It's a totally distant memory, right? The Bill of Rights and those kinds of things, the idea of Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 5, you shall be a natural born citizen to hold the office of the presidency. Barack Obama could never establish that. George H.W. Bush lied about his, right? Kamala Harris is not a natural born citizen, but a native born citizen, ineligible to hold the office. Who cares? No one at the law enforcement level cares. No one in Congress cares. No one cares. I mean, the truth is, no one cares. The truth is, you can have all kinds of 33,000 emails that appear to be acts of espionage on Hillary Clinton's server. No one cares. You can have open quid pro quo where a President Biden openly admits that he withheld $1 billion worth of funding for Ukraine until they fired a prosecutor that was looking into the godfather of the oligarchs in Ukraine, right? No one cares. No one cares. No one cares about any of it. No one cares. Bottom line is, no one cares. So when you talk about a constitutional republic, there is no constitutional republic, right? There is not even barely a shadow of a constitutional republic remaining. What we have now is a corrupt group of thugs controlling the United States government who are using it to pilfer and loot it and to place the money into their own pocket. And they're so reckless that they're beginning to start a third world nuclear war with Russia. So when we speak of law and order, it brings to mind the question, which law? Shall we follow the laws of secularism, the separation of church and state, so nobly proclaimed by our own oligarchs? And yes, we do have oligarchs here. Shall we divorce ourselves, apostasy is the Greek word there, from the tenets of righteousness in order to follow the mandate of equal protection in a world that knows no definite truth and allows for every kind of human behavior to be protected as a matter of law? Now, see, this is the problem with equal protection, okay? Because when we say, well, it has to be exactly equal protection. Well, if there's no standard, then you can't have anything except, mule, right? You can't have anything except a thin layer of bean paste because everybody else has got an opinion. Well, I'm not equally protected. I'm an atheist, and I'm not equally protected if I have to pray in school. Well, I don't believe in patriotism. I'm not equally protected if we have to say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Well, I have an extreme sexual orientation that wants me to marry, 3 different kinds of animals, and I'm not equally protected under the laws because you're depriving me of my happiness, right? Equal protection. When does equal protection become God instead of righteousness? Well, it is in this country under the 14th Amendment and the secular state. Equal protection has greater authority than does righteousness. Okay. In the catastrophic collapse of our social order, can we find leadership that is not corrupt? That's a question. Leadership that has not taken a bribe, leadership that does not break their oath of fidelity, leadership that honors he who created us all. As Shalomah once said, there is nothing new under the sun. As we fall from a first world status to a third world status, and that's what's going on right now. We are falling from a first world status where we had everything that we ever wanted and more. And instead of being thankful for that, we became gluttonous. We're now falling from that, and we're falling into a third world status. We too are going to look a lot like Venezuela in terms of food shortages, lines at supermarkets, lines at gas stations, hunger, deprivation, starvation, right? As all empires come to an end, and yet the righteous king remains, right? Okay, let us recognize the failures of man have been seen before. As we collapse from an affluent world to a world of hardship, diseases, famine, and deprivation, let us recognize that this too has been seen before. Yet the righteous lawgiver remains. As our judiciary reaches a point of depravity that is no longer able to or capable of rendering true justice or righteous judgments, let us recognize that in all of this, a righteous judge remains, and his judgment remains. He who breathed life into our nostrils, who set our hearts to beating, who founded life in the blood, considered the failures of man in his sinful flesh, and planned to bring about a righteous world when he would make himself manifest as a righteous king, the righteous lawgiver, and the righteous judge. As we look fervently to his arrival, is it possible for us to seek his kingdom even now? It is. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Ask, and ye shall receive. Seek righteousness in the kingdom of Yahweh, for truly we have one king, one lawgiver, and one judge. And whether our leaders admit it or not, we are all subject to his rule, his Torah, and his judgment. All right. So with all that being said, I wonder if we can share the screen here and get something going. Let's see here. Looks like it. Let's see if we can pull this up. All right. So thank you guys. I'm glad you guys are here. I'm glad you guys are being able to see this broadcast. I mean, there's times, I'll tell you, the computer problems I went through here just before the show, it was amazing. Anyway, I managed to get it cleared up. And now here we are. We're going to be looking at tonight's presentation on the king, the lawgiver, and the judge. Okay. All right. So we start out with a passage from Isaiah 33, verse 22. Very important passage, because this really is the foundation upon which true governance is based. As you can see it expressed in Yah. For Yahweh is our judge, Yahweh is our Torah giver, and Yahweh is our king. He will save us. Okay, this is the premise from Isaiah 33, 22. This is a great verse for you to memorize. We see once again the 22 letters of the Ivrit alphabet being shown here. 33, Yahweh is our judge. 1, Torah giver. 2, king. 3, okay? And so here I'm going to lay out the Hebrew for us so we can take a look at this passage a little bit better. And you can see that this passage is pretty well interpreted. Ki Yahweh shofet nu. Shofet nu. Here, let me get my... We can't do this without a little annotation, right? So here we see shofet nu, right? Now, so shofet... Oh, I need a brighter, bigger line than that. Just a minute. Let's try this. Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I've seen better colors. Maybe I can put that in white. Let's see if that does better. That's a little better. Okay, so shofet nu here. Shofet nu. So what is this? This is, shofet here, the root, shofet, judge, right? Nu, our, prefix nu. The pronominal suffix, nu, our judge, right? And so we see Yahweh, shofet nu. Yahweh, okay, machok kenu, okay? So here, prefix, right? And then you have hok here, hok. Now, hok is, of course, law. Kanu, given to us, okay? Yahweh, machok kenu, okay? He also gives to us the law. Yahweh, okay, and then here we see melech nu, or in this case, melchenu. But you can see here that our root here, once again, melech, king, melech, nu, our king, who, remember in Hebrew, who is he? He is she, dog is fish, etc. But here we are, who, what? Yoshiyanu, Yoshiyanu, right? Our Savior, okay? All right. So I wanted to show you that Hebrew so you can see there very important passage. All right. So when we look at this, we're going to spend a little bit of time kind of outside for scripture for just a second. And that is to talk about a little bit of government history, a little bit of government past. So we see this passage in 33:22, Yashar'el. And now we see Aristotle's three forms of governance, right? And with Aristotle's three forms of governments, we see that there is by the many, which is democracy, by the few, which is oligarchy, and by the one, which is tyranny. Now, in Aristotle's words, this one was the worst form, democracy, because it's mob rule. And in a pure democracies last not very long, because they vote themselves to property of those who have it and give it to those that don't. And it doesn't last very long. Pure democracy is gone in very short order. Oligarchy is where a group of a few people control and rule. And of course, tyranny is tyranny of the one. Now, in America's three forms of government, we have three branches of government: the legislative, which is a limited democracy; judicial, which is a limited oligarchy. And the only thing limiting the Supreme Court, by the way, is its jurisdiction. Well, you don't have jurisdiction to hear that, guys. There's no justiciable case in front of you. There's no facts upon which you can judge. The plaintiff doesn't have standing. Therefore, you don't have jurisdiction. Therefore, you can't exercise whatever authority you have. You have to have jurisdiction. So it's a limited oligarchy. It's a group of people, 9 right now, a group of people, 9, that have a limited jurisdiction. They're judicial. Okay, it's a limited oligarchy. And then finally, an executive, which is a limited tyranny. So literally, we took Aristotle's forms, democracy, oligarchy, tyranny, and we created them in the three branches of government in the United States called legislative, judicial, and executive. This kind of government also exists in a constitutional monarchy where you have a parliament, and then, of course, you have a judiciary predicated upon the common law, and then you have a monarch like the king or queen. Same kind of idea. You have a tyrant, you have a democratic organization called a parliament or a legislature or a Congress or a Duma or whatever you want to call it, Knesset. And then, of course, you have the limited oligarchy, which is going to be a Supreme Court or a court and its aspects. However, Yah's forms of government, king, Torah giver, judge. And all of this is found in a singular form in Yahweh, not in these multiple things of by the many, by the few, and by the one. Okay, so the governance of America's colonies was subordinate to their faith. All 13 of the original American colonies required an attestation of religious belief or affiliation, a religious oath, as a prerequisite for an individual to hold public office. Right? These oaths were viewed as instruments of social control, given the traditional view that citizens were trustworthy as civil servants only if they were willing to affirm their allegiance to basic religious tenets. Okay? Basic religious tenets. Only if they did that. If they didn't do that, they were untrustworthy. Okay, well, I'm going to ask you a question now that we've been here for a while. Did these guys know something that we should have known? How trustworthy are our civil servants right now? Just a question. All right. In the 8-year period following the independence of 1776, 11 of the 13 original states adopted new constitutions. Of the states adopting new constitutions, most simply reaffirmed the religious test that had been enforced during the colonial era. The states that allowed only Protestants. Now, this is a critical point. Only Protestants. Why only Protestants? Because Catholicism was outlawed in the United States, as was Christmas was outlawed in the United States during 1776. Only Protestants were allowed to hold office in Georgia, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Vermont. 3 states, Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, required only that the office holders be Christian. Okay, so would that allow for JWs? Would that allow for Mormons? Well, the JWs and the Mormons weren't around back then. But the reason why there was a discrepancy is because you had deists like Jefferson, like Madison, like Franklin, like Washington. You had these deists who were marginally Christian, claiming to hold Christian views, that if you kind of look like a Christian, you kind of smell like a Christian, well, then you can hold office in Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, right? Only Virginia and New York, those two great places, declined to require religious oaths for civil servants. And we know that now New York and Pennsylvania are absolutely the model for upstanding morality in the country. I mean, if you look at the moral leadership of New York, wow, what an outstanding place, that allows for abortion up to 28 days after the child is born. These kinds of things, right? Just moral pinnacles right here. Okay. Although Connecticut and Rhode Island failed to adopt new constitutions, the constitutions of each of these two states nonetheless required office holders to be Protestants. But in 1961, the oligarchs that we call the Supreme Court invalidated religious tests at the state level in the case of Torcaso versus Watkins as violations of the First Amendment's Free Exercise Clause. Now, it's funny how the Free Exercise Clause works really well to invalidate religious holdings, religious standards, but does nothing to validate religious standards. If you're trying to validate a religious standard, saying, well, we have the free exercise to practice this, the court throws a lemon at you. It's called the lemon test. They throw a lemon at you and they say, no, you don't have any free exercise to do anything. Shut your face. You're out of here. Prayer was invalidated 2 years later. Okay, well, let's look at the illustrious history of the oligarchs in their brilliance in the United States of America. Okay, let's see. The judges of the United States Supreme Court in 1857. These people don't want to be named. Oh, this was a decision penned by so-and-so. We can only talk about this. Oh, yeah? Well, let's talk about it. These were the judges that voted for the Dred Scott decision. This found that slaves had no rights a white man was bound to respect. That's what it's holding us. Slaves have no rights a white man is bound to respect. This was Roger B. Taney, the Chief Justice, who wrote the decision, James Moore Wayne, John Catron, Peter Vivian Daniels, Samuel Nelson, John Archibald Campbell, and Robert Cooper Greer, who adopted this decision, the Dred Scott decision. Started the Civil War, right? These guys, brilliant. Okay, well, just because we lost the Civil War and, our racism was going to be kind of pushed back into a box for a little while, not long, because when we get to 1896, just a mere 40 years later, Melville Fuller, the Chief Justice, Stephen John Field, Horace Gray, Henry Billings Brown, George Shiras Jr., Edward Douglas White, and Rufus Peckham adopted Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. And yes, guess who created segregation in America? Remember segregation? Remember how evil, vile the segregationists were? Segregation, although anybody who's in favor of segregation is a racist, bigot, pig, dog, everything else. Guess who created it? Guess who created segregation in America? These guys did. These guys did. These guys did. These guys did. But if you think they were done, you were wrong. You're wrong, because just a few years later in Lawgiver versus New York, that's not 1973. It's 1916, I believe. Let's see who the decision makers were. Oh, let's see. There's Rufus Peckham. Oh, okay. There's Melville Fuller. Oh, okay. There's Henry Billings Brown. Yeah, okay, we got him. Here's Joseph McKenna, whose great-grandson is Rob McKenna, former Attorney General of the state of Washington. And then, of course, this fellow, David J. Brewer, who happened to be absent when Plessy versus Ferguson was decided. These guys went ahead and terminated the freedom of contract in Lawgiver versus New York. Oh, yeah. Yeah. We have the state has a clear interest in terminating your ability to contract, said the oligarchs. Okay, they're not done. These oligarchs aren't done. Let's see what else we have. Let's go back here. Okay, how about this? 1961, Earl Warren. Hugo Black, Felix Frankfurter, William O. Douglas, Tom C. Clarke, John Marshall Harlan II, William J. Brennan, Charles Evan Whitaker, and Potter Stewart. Well, they terminated religious oaths for state leaders. Hey, you guys don't have the right to have a religious society anymore, or to have an expectation that your leaders should be trustworthy under doctrines that were respected by this country when it was founded by the pioneers when they got here as Protestants. Nope, those religious oaths have to be terminated because you have to comport with us, the big federal secular government, right? Because secularism, as you know, is good, 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 good. So they terminated religious oaths for state leaders. Well, if you think they're done, you're crazy. Let's get into 1963 when Earl Warren, oh, there he is. Hugo Black, yeah, same guy. William O. Douglas, yeah, that guy is still here. Tom C. Clarke, yeah, still here. John Marshall Harlan, yeah, still here. Potter Stewart, yes. And then William J. Brennan, oh, yeah. But we got two new guys, Byron White and Arthur Goldberg. These guys decided it was time to terminate prayer in school because somebody, an atheist, Madeline Murray O'Hare, needed equal protection. And equal protection is a God superior to Yah. You see, equal protection is superior to righteousness. Equal protection is superior to Yah. Equal protection is superior to the long-standing law of the world because it's equal. We don't want anybody to get their nose out of joint about being unequal. Terminated prayer in the school. Okay, well, let's see who's left. Who do we have left out of these geeks who would continue on their merry way, these oligarchs who were righteous above the rest of us and who know more than the rest of us? That's why they're the oligarchs. Let's see. Oh, hey, here's William O. Douglas. He's going to show up again. Oh, there's Byron Wright. He's there. There's William J. Brennan. Yeah, he's there. Let's see. Oh, Potter Stewart still hanging out. And then who we got a new guy here. We got Harry Blackmun, who would write the decision, and Warren Burger, Chief Justice, and of course, William Rehnquist, who's going to sit on the court for a long time, and Thurgood Marshall. And what did they decide to do? Well, they terminated 63,459,781 infants so far in Roe versus Wade. So far. Oh, the oligarchs, they're just brilliant. They're just, these guys are just brilliant. This is why we should have oligarchy ruling the country, because they're so smart and so brilliant. And they only make good quality, high moral decisions that lead our nation right into righteousness, right? Okay, 2014, Obergefell versus Hodges. Anthony Kennedy, now deceased. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, now deceased. Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan terminated traditional marriage in the United States. Scalia, in a dissenting opinion, also now deceased, said this: "The issue of whether gay couples can marry is not of immense personal importance to me," Scalia wrote in his dissent. "It is overwhelming importance. It is of overwhelming importance, however, who it is that rules me," he continued. "Today's decree says that my ruler and the ruler of 320 million Americans coast to coast is a majority of the 9 lawyers on the Supreme Court." Well, yeah, bingo. Yeah. Welcome to the oligarchy. Welcome to the oligarchy. So this is their history. This is the history of this oligarchy. This is what they have done. This is where they have led us. And this is who they are, right? And they claim that the secular state, the separation of church and state, which, by the way, was intended to keep the state out of the church, not the church out of the state, they claim that secularism, the secular state, under the doctrines of equal protection, is superior to the righteous state. Well, let's look and see the fruit of that tree. We talked about the fruit of the tree in the opening statement. The fruit of that tree is when we practice robust secularism, we have become a diseased nation unto death. And now it's not even a matter of debate anymore. The question is, I mean, unless you want to debate, if you walk into a hospital room and there's somebody who's got cancerous tumors growing out of 4 parts of their body that are the size of bowling balls, their complexion is kind of a pale green from the gangrene running up their knees, and all of their stuff is one step away from flatline, and the doctors are shaking their head at you. Now, if you want to deny that that's a deathbed, go ahead and deny it. But we're going to talk about something different. We're going to talk about our king, our lawgiver, and our judge. And let's see how this works out. Let's begin with a prophecy that goes completely unpreached. Why does it go unpreached? Because the church, the Christian church, has been told that there is a singular, unique, set-aside name for the Messiah named Jesus that has no precedent in the Old Testament whatsoever. It appears for the first time in Matthew 1 and didn't appear at all anywhere in the Old Testament ever. Well, any Greek student will tell you that that is a patent lie, because the name in Greek, which appears throughout the New Testament, identifying the Messiah, is Jesus, right? And so you see this, Jesus, let me see if I can do this. Jesus, right? Jesus, this is the Greek name for Messiah, okay? Okay, well, is there any other place where we can see Jesus? Well, yeah, absolutely there is. In fact, in this passage that I'm going to talk about right here, maybe switch this over to white so we can see it. The name Joshua is in the Greek Jesus. Oh, yeah. The name Joshua in the Greek is Jesus. And the book Joshua in the Greek Septuagint is, guess what? Jesus Navi. And it is used 89 times to identify Joshua, the son of Nun, Ben Nun, as Jesus. Okay, so we should know, and it would be reasonable to conclude that the name wherever Joshua appeared would be a name that would have some inference implying Yahusha, the Mashiach. Well, and if we had known that, then guess what we would have found? That this prophecy wasn't talking about Moses's friend. Let's read it. And he showed me Yahusha, the high priest. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, hold it here. Yahusha, the high priest. Now, this is a vision of Zachariah in heaven, having been translated and speaking with an angel. And this angel is saying, hey, look. And he looked and he showed Zachariah, Yahusha, the high priest, not the warrior who led Israel over the Yarden, but Yahusha, the high priest, standing before the angel of Yahweh, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. And Yahweh said unto Satan, Yahweh rebuke you, Satan. Even Yahweh that has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Is not this a brand plucked out of the fire? Now take a look at this. Yahusha was clothed with filthy garments and stood before the angel. And he answered and spoke unto those that stood before him, saying, take away the filthy garments from him. And unto him he said, behold, I have caused your iniquity to pass from you, and I will clothe you with a change of raiment. And I said, let them set a fair turban upon his head. And so they set a fair turban upon his head and clothed him with garments. And the angel of Yahweh stood by. Okay. All right, looking good. But look at this, guys. Now, Yahusha was clothed with filthy garments, right? Now, let's take a look at Strong's and see what it has to say here. How filthy were these garments, right? Because we see here, the phrase in Ivrit is begadim soyim, right? Now, again, when we talk about the rules of construction in Hebrew, since begadim is in the plural, then its adjective is also going to be in the plural. Begadim soyim, right? Filthy clothes, or clothes which are filthy. But zo means what? From an unused root meaning to issue, soiled, as if excrementitious. When we talk about these filthy garments that Yahusha was wearing, they were excrementitious. You know what this means? Like a baby's diaper, filthy, filthy, filthy. Okay. Obviously, clearly prophetic. And it goes on to say, and the angel of Yahweh protested unto Yahusha, saying, thus says Yahweh Tsebaot, if you will walk in my ways and if you will guard my watch, then you shall also judge my house and shall guard my courts, and I will give you places to walk among those that stand by. Hear now, O Yahusha, the high priest, you and your fellows that sit before you. Okay, wait a minute. Your fellows that sit before you. Who are these people that Zachariah is talking about? Who are these fellows that sit before Yahusha, the high priest? Well, that would be the 12, right? Minus one, plus one. The 12, for they are men wondered at. For behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. In this case, the term zemach. For behold, the stone that I have laid before Yahusha, upon one stone shall be 7 eyes. Okay, here we got some stone with 7 eyes. Behold, I will engrave the graving thereof, says Yahweh Tsebaot, and I will remove the iniquity of that land in 1 day. Okay, so there is some stone that's going to be engraved by Yah himself with 7 eyes. Something to think about. In that day, says Yahweh Tsebaot, shall ye call every man his neighbor. Okay. Under the vine, or Gethen, and under the fig tree, or Tehane. Okay. So here's the prophecy, right? And this prophecy is telling us what? That once Yahusha and his men that walk with him, the fellows that sit before him who are wondered at, once their time has arrived, well, guess what? Every man shall be called his neighbor. And this is the teaching that Mashiach gives us in the gospel when he talks about the Good Samaritan. He says, well, who is your neighbor, right? Who is your neighbor? Was it the Levite that walked by and saw the guy and said, I can't touch the guy, make me unclean? Was it the priest who said, I can't touch the guy, makes me unclean? Or was it the neighbor who was not of the house of Yashar'el that found him, took him to a hotel, paid his bills? Yahusha asked the scribes the question, who is his neighbor? And what we find is that every man is your neighbor because the veil of the temple has been torn down. There is neither Greek nor Jew. There is neither male nor female before the cross. Every man is your neighbor. Now, in Yaakov, we're going to get a little bit more discussion about this same kind of idea, right? This is the book of James, chapter 4, verses 1 through 5, or 10 through 15, I'm sorry. Humble yourselves in the sight of Yahweh, and he shall lift you up. Amen. Speak not evil of one another, brethren. He that speaks evil of his brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the Torah and judges the Torah. But if you judge the Torah, you are not a doer of the Torah, but a judge. Yet there is one Torah giver who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you that judge one another? And then Timothy Shani, Paul says of the following in chapter 4. I charge you therefore before Elohim and the Adonai Yahusha HaMashiach, who shall judge the quick and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Guess who's going to be sitting on the throne of judgment? Preach the word, be ready in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort, and with all long suffering and doctrine, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall instead be turned unto fables. Okay. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to check something here real quick. Yeah, here we go. Okay. And then in Kefa Rishon, Peter, what's it say? And if you call on the Father, who, without respect of persons, judges according to every man's work. Oh no, you're talking about works. You're talking about works. Where man is not saved by works. No, but man is judged by works. Whoops. Pass the time of your sojourning here in fear. For as much as ye know that ye were not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver and gold, from your vain conversation, received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Mashiach, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot, who truly was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you, who by him do believe in Elohim, that raised him up from the dead and gave him glory, that your faith and hope might be in Elohim, seeing ye have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Ruach, unto unfeigned love of the brethren. See that ye love one another with a pure heart fervently, being born again, not of corruptible seed, but of incorruptible, by the word of Elohim, which lives and abides forever. Yet we have a king of righteousness, as the psalmist said in Tehillim 93, Psalm 93. Yahweh reigns. He is clothed with majesty. Yahweh is clothed with strength, wherewith he has girded himself. The world also is established, that it cannot be moved. Your throne is established of old. You are from everlasting. The floods have lifted up, O Yahweh. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their waves. Yahweh on high is mightier than the noise of many waters, yea, than the mighty waves of the sea. Your testimonies are very sure. Holiness becomes your house, O Yahweh, forever. And the psalmist goes on to say in Psalm 110, a very important psalm coming up here, a psalm that is quoted by both Mashiach and is quoted in the book of Acts. Yahweh said unto my Adonai, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footpath. Now, what's so important about this passage? Well, what's so important about it has to do with this word right here, right? Yahweh said unto my Adonai. So Yahweh is speaking to someone other than David. He's speaking to David's Adonai. Yahweh said unto my Adonai, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footpath. Yahweh shall send the rod of your strength out of Zion. Rule in the midst of your enemies. Your people shall be willing in the day of your power, in the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning. You have the dew of your youth. Yahweh has sworn 7 oaths and will not repent. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Who is the priest forever after the order of Melchizedek if it isn't my Adonai? Right? Wish I could draw better here today, but that's the way it is, I guess. We just have to live with kind of this bad drawing. Okay, now here's a prophecy that I just love. This is a prophecy that's coming out of the book of Hanoch. Hanoch. Actually, it's not Hanoch, but Hanoch. Okay. Thus Yahweh commanded, and this is out of chapter 62, by the way, of Hanoch, the book of Enoch. Thus Yahweh commanded the kings, the princes, the exalted, and those who dwell on the earth, saying, open your eyes and lift up your horns, if you are capable of comprehending the elect one, right? Pay attention here. Smell some coffee. Yahweh Tsebaot sat upon the throne of his glory, and the Ruach Tzedakah, the holy Ruach, the Ruach Tzedakah, was poured out over him. The word of his mouth shall destroy all sinners and all the wicked who shall perish at his presence. And that is, okay, no, who are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about the elect one. The Ruach Tzedakah was poured out over him. You recall that the elect one, Yahusha, was baptized, and the dove appeared above him. The Ruach appeared above him as a dove, right? The Ruach Tzedakah, the spirit of righteousness, the breath of righteousness, Ruach Tzedakah, was poured out over him. The word of his mouth shall destroy all the sinners and all the wicked, right? They shall perish by the double-edged sword that comes out of his mouth. Who shall perish at the sight of his coming? But in this case, it says perish at his presence. In that day shall all the kings, the princes, the exalted, and those who possess the earth stand up, behold, and perceive that he is sitting on the throne of his glory, that before him the Kodashim shall be judged in righteousness, and that nothing which shall be spoken before him shall be in vain. And it goes on. Trouble shall come upon them as upon a woman in travail. A woman in travail is in labor pains. This is discussed in the Olivet sermon in both Matthew 24 and in Luke 21, right? Trouble shall come upon them as a woman in travail, whose labor is severe when her child comes to the mouth of the womb, and she finds it difficult to bring forth. One portion of them shall look upon another. They shall be astonished and shall humble their countenance. And trouble shall seize them when they shall behold this son of Adam sitting upon the throne of his glory. Then shall the kings, the princes, and all those who possess the earth glorify him who has dominion over all things, him who was concealed, for from the beginning the son of Adam existed in secret, which El Elyon preserved in the presence of his power and revealed to the elect. He shall sow the assembly of the Kodashim and of the elect, and all the elect shall stand before him in that day. All the kings, the princes, the exalted, and those who rule over all the earth shall fall down on their faces before him and shall worship him. Every knee shall bend, every tongue shall confess. They shall fix their hopes on this son of Adam, shall pray to him and petition him for mercy. Now, bear in mind, this is the book that was supposed to be excluded from Scripture. This was the prophecy that no one was supposed to read, right? Oh, Enoch is heretical. Well, Tertullian read this passage and said, if it says that, then it must be read by the disciple. Origen said the same thing. Justin Martyr agreed that it was canonical. Why? It was not canonical for Judaism, but most assuredly canonical for those of the elect and the Kodashim to whom this was revealed. To them, canonical. We have a king of righteousness. The passage in Isaiah, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, El Gibor, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The zeal of Yahweh Sebaot will perform this. The same Yahweh Sebaot who appeared in Hanok before us. Same Yah. All right, let's look at this passage a little bit and let's see what this looks like in the Ivrit, just for fun, because I think it's going to be good. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, El Gibor, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Okay, that's how that reads in English. Let's see if that's close. Okay, so what we're going to see here is something very interesting, right? So we start out with Ki Yeled, right? Ki Yeled, Ki Yeled, Yeled Lanu, Ben, right? Nachen, excuse me, Ben Natan Lanu, Natan Lanu. Okay, so this phrase right here, so you have Ki Yeled, for a son, for a child, right? Yeled Lanu, a child to us, a child to us. Ben Nitan Lanu, a son given to us. So it reads in English, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. But what we see here, for a child to us, a son is given to us, is kind of a literal translation of that phrase, right? Then you have Vati, actually it's Vathi, but when you look at it closely, you can see that when we look at this word, you can see that there's kind of a vowel missing, right? So when you talk about this, vat he, so we see here like this, okay? So here is this vat he right here. And you can see, okay? So here we have this idea of the prefix and, right? But technically with this dagash here in the tav, we see that this is actually two T's, right? Two T's. And so you have one T, which is actually kind of the prefix. There's a prefix here, right? And so this prefix of tav is an important prefix because it gives it's a prefix commonly found with the law, right? And so you could say tahi, but actually it's haya. So there is a he that is kind of disguised here that should appear in this word haya, okay? So you say vati haya, which would mean and shall come to pass. And shall come to pass, right? Because that's the prefix in the te. And shall come to pass, ha misra, the government, al shikmo or shechemo, on his neck, or on his shoulder. Okay. Now, again, let's take a look at the verb here in the Vayikra form. Vayik kara shemo, right? And he shall be called by his name. Shemo, his name, Shem, Shemo, by his name. And Vayik kara, and he shall be called by his name. Vayik kara Shemo, right? All right, now let's take a look at some of these names that he's being called. Hey, Pele, a miracle, or wonderful, right? Yoetz, counselor. Remember, guys might remember that in Isaiah 11:2, there is a listing of the 7 ruachot of Yahweh, the 7 ruachot, and one of those ruachs is called the ruach etza, right? Which is the spirit of counsel would be upon him, the spirit of counsel. And in this case, yoetz, counselor, okay? Then literally the word is El Gibor. Let me see if I can find where that is. The El Gibor, let's see. Yeah, El Gibor, right here. El Gibor, right? Then you have Avi Ad. So here's Avi here, and here's the Ad. And the Ad is what? Ad means perpetual. So it literally means, Avi Ad means perpetual father, right? And the English, it says, well, everlasting father. Well, let's use the phrase everlasting instead of perpetual father. And then finally, we have a joined word with the Bachef. We have the Sar Shalom. Now, Prince described as the Prince of Peace, but it is this word Sar from where we get the word Caesar, where we get the word Tsar, right? Tsar, and Caesar, Kaiser, right? Keser. It all comes from this Sar, okay? The Sar Shalom. So what we're talking about, we've looked at this Ivrit a little bit, but when we look at this, we have to remember that what are they saying here? Let's try to cut to the point here, okay? The son, the child that is given to us, right? His name is going to be called Everlasting Father. Now, when we look at Vayikara Shemo, right? Vayikara Shemo. Okay, now you can say he shall be called by his name, but technically the shall is not in there. Why not? Because there's no ta in here, right? Vayitekara, and he shall be called Shemo. But rather this is, and he is called, and he is called by his name. Okay, so now that's a little bit different. So now we're talking about, and he is called Wonderful Counselor, El Gabor, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. This, again, is going to tell you that this name Yahweh and Yahusha are this intense interchangeability. When the Son says, I come in the name of the Father and you do not know me, it has to do with this Yod He Vav that is going to be appearing in his name. Okay. Of the increase of his government and peace, there shall be no end upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it, to establish it with judgment and justice henceforth forever. So we see here what? We see that there is a promise that the Son shall be seated upon the throne as the king, and upon the Son's kingdom, he shall bring order to it, that is to say, the law, and bring judgment to it, that is to say, he will act as a judge with justice. So again, you see the Son is going to be appearing as the king, the lawmaker, and the judge. All right. Well, let's get to a question. Now, I mean, I got to share with you guys. I like this question a little bit, and I'm sure those of you guys who've been around with me for a while following this, you follow this question too. But let's ask it here: is the Son of Mary actually in the line of David? Now, this is a good question. Since he's going to sit on the throne of David, is he in the line of David? I suppose that might be a question that's worthy of answering. Well, we have an interesting passage in Matthew 1:16, and I'm going to share with you what this passage reads from these different forms. The KJV, and Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary. NIV, and Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. NKJV, and Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary. And Jacob fathered Joseph, the husband of Mary. Okay, that's interesting that they're going to have the husband of Mary. Okay, so this tells you that Matthew 1:16 is about the lineage of Joseph and not the lineage of Mary. It's the lineage of Joseph and not the lineage of Mary. Well, how do we know that? Because there's other women mentioned in Matthew 1 and they aren't counted. Whether you're talking about Rahab or you're talking about Ruth or you're talking about Bathsheba, none of these women are counted in the count, although they are mentioned. Well, does that matter? Yeah, it does. Now, let's take a look at this. Since Matthew 1 is about Joseph and his lineage, and Luke 3 is about Joseph and his lineage, let's compare them to see if, in fact, we have similar lineage between the two. Okay, well, here's Joseph and Joseph, right? That happens. But then who's Joseph's father? Well, in Matthew 1, it's Yaakov, but no, Eli, that's not right. Matan, well, Matan might be, arguably Matityahu. How about his dad? Well, Eleazar and Levi, nah. Eliel and Malchi, Joachim and Yana, nah, not really. Zadok and Yosef, no. Azur and Matityahu, nope. Eliakim and Amos, no. Abihud and Nahum, no. Zerubbabel and Eliyahu, no. Shealtiel and Shimon, no. Okay, well, we got some problems here, don't we? Because these are just completely inconsistent with one another. So the question is, and the discrepancies go on and on. So which gospel is not telling you the truth? Right? This is an open contradiction between Luke and Matthew. You can't get around it. And not only that, because claiming that Joseph is the husband of Mary in Matthew 1, you have a real problem, because that means that both of these lineages, one of which is correct and one isn't, Mary isn't related to David at all. And you recall that Luke 3 says Joseph, the supposed father of Mashiach. Therefore, if you take these scriptures on their face, and in particular the ones that we just looked at back here, KJV, NIV, NKJV, NASB, but it goes on and on and on and on and on, you're going to find out that, there's no possible way that Mashiach, there's one of two things. Either one, Joseph was the actual father of Mashiach, such that the lineage passed, or there's no possible way that Mashiach is in the bloodline of David at all, at any level. So how does he sit on the throne of David? Well, let's take a look and see what we find in the Sefer. Now, I'm going to put the count in here. I'm going to show you guys, illustrate here what's going on. And the Sefer of the generation of Yahshua HaMashiach, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And Abraham begat Yitzchak. So Abraham's 1, Yitzchak 2, Yitzchak Yaakov 3, Yehuda 4, Peretz 5, Chetzron 6, Aram 7, Aminadab 8, Naxon 9, Salma 10, Boaz 11. Of Rakab, there's woman number 1. Boaz begat Oved, number 12. Of Roth, there's woman number 2. And Oved begat Yishai, number 13. And Yishai begat David, number 14. Okay, so David's 14. Boom, we got that. And David the king begat Shalomah, that's 1, and who was also a king. And her that had been the woman of Uriah. Okay, so here you see, right here, 3 women named in Matthew 1, none of whom are counted. And Shalomah begat Rechavam, that's the 2nd. Then Abiyahu, 3rd king. Asa, 4th king. Yehoshaphat, 5th king. Joram, 6th king. Uzziyahu, 7th king. Jotham, 8th king. Achaz, 9th king. Yekiskiyahu, 10th king. Manasseh, 11th king. Amon, 12th king. Yoshiyahu, 13th king. And Yoshiyahu begat Yekoniyahu, 14th. And his brethren about the time they were carried away into Babel. Okay, so Yekoniyahu, 14. All right, so far, David at 14, Yekoniyahu at 14. Now, let's see here what happens when we talk about the husband of Miriam, okay? So they're about to Babel. Yekoniyahu begat Shealtiel, that's 1 in exile. Zerubbabel, 2 in exile. Abihud, 3 in exile. Eliakim, 4 in exile. Azur, 5 in exile. Zadok, 6 in exile. Joachim, 7 in exile. Eliel, 8 in exile. Eleazar, 9 in exile. Matan, 10 in exile. Yaakov, 11 in exile. Yaakov begat Yosef, 12 in exile. Now, if this is the husband of Miriam, then we get Yahusha, who's 13. But when it's Yosef, the father of Miriam, now we count Miriam as number 13 and is born Yahusha, number 14, who is called Mashiach. Why is that important? Because verse 17 says, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14. From David unto the carrying away into Babel are 14. And from the carrying away into Babel unto Mashiach are 14 generations. Whereas if you read it in those other Bibles I was talking about, you're going to get 14, 14, and 13. 14, 14, and 13. So somebody got something a little bit wrong. We believe the proper answer is Yosef, the father of Miriam. The father of Miriam. Okay. Well, then who gave us the Torah? There's a question. Since we're talking about the lawgiver, who gave us the Torah? Well, here in Deuteronomy or Devarim, chapter 5, we see the following discussion. And Moshe called all Yashar'el and said unto them, hear, O Yashar'el, Shema Yashar'el, the commandments and the judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that ye may learn them, guard them, and do them. Yahweh Eloheinu cut a covenant with us in Horeb. Yahweh cut not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us, who are all of us here alive this day. Yahweh talked with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire. Then he proceeds to reiterate what we call the 10 commandments or the 10 Devarim, which I talked about last week. Then he concludes this way in 5:22. These words, Yahweh spoke unto all your assembly in the mount out of the midst of the fire, out of the cloud, and out of the thick darkness with a great voice. And he added no more. There's a phrase worth highlighting. And he wrote them on 2 sapphire stones and delivered them unto me. And it came to pass, when ye heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, for the mountain did burn with fire, that ye came near unto me, and even all the heads of your tribes and your elders. And ye said, behold, Yahweh Eloheinu has showed us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire, and we have seen this day that Elohim talks with man, and he lives. This is our Torah giver. This is our judge. This is our king. So in the Gospel of Yohanan, John in chapter 5, we get this discussion. Then answered Yahusha and said unto them, Amen, amen, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees at the Father do. For what things soever he does, these also does the Son likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all things that he himself does, and he will show him greater works than these, that ye may marvel. For as the Father raises up the dead and quickens them, even so the Son quickens whom he will. For the Father judges no man, but has committed all judgment unto the Son. The Father judges no man, but has committed all judgment unto the Son. That all men should honor the Son, even as they honor the Father. He that honors not the Son honors not the Father which has sent him. You know, what's interesting about this is that even the Quran, in the first surah called the Cow, says that Yahusha, Isa they call him, will come to judge the living and the dead. Interesting. And Yochanan goes on to say, chapter 5, 24 through 29, Amen, amen, I say unto you, he that hears my word and believes on him that sent me has everlasting life and shall not come into condemnation. He that hears my word, and believes on him that sent me has everlasting life and shall not come into condemnation, but is passed from death into life. Amen, amen, I say unto you, the hour is coming and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of Elohim, and they that hear shall live. For as the Father has life in himself, so has he given to the Son to have life in himself, and has given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the son of Adam. Given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the son of Adam and the son of Elohim. Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in which all that are in the grave shall hear his voice, and shall come forth, they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation. Well, as for the governments of this world, let's consider Paul's admonition for a second. This is from Galatians. Even so, when we were children, we were in bondage by the elements of the world. Now, the elements of the world, right? This phrase right here, the elements of the world, he's talking about the secular stuff that goes on in our life, right? We're in bondage by speed limits. We're in bondage by regulation. We're in bondage by administrative code. We're in bondage by statute. We're in bondage by financial statements. We're in bondage by the claim that fiat currency is legal tender. We're in bondage by the engraved images. We're in bondage by the passports that are required of us to freely travel, right? But when the fullness of time was come, Elohim sent forth his son, who was born of a woman and subject to the law. Subject to the law. Now, we're talking about the law right here. We're talking about government. To redeem them that were under the law, that is government, that we might receive the adoption of sons. And because ye are sons, Elohim has sent forth the ruach of his son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Wherefore you are no more a servant, but a son. And if a son, then an heir of Elohim through Mashiach. Howbeit then, when ye knew not Elohim, ye did service unto them which by nature are not Elohim. And I've added, but mere governing mortals. Now you see here that this claim here is telling us pretty clearly that, yeah, we're born under the law. We're born in the secular state. We're born with a birth certificate in all capital letters. We're born as chattel property. We're born owned by a nation. We're born with subject to someone's jurisdiction, right? Someone's authority, someone's claim over us, someone's law. But he says, no, when you are given forth the ruach of his son in his heart's crying, Abba, Father, crying out to Yah, the Father. Wherefore you are no more a servant, but a son and an heir of Elohim through Mashiach. We are much, much more than the servants of a failing state. Okay, what about Cephas' admonition? He also is going to talk about this. 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 10 through 13. But the day of Yahweh will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all purity of conversation and holiness? Oh, wait a minute. You ought to be in all purity of conversation. There's something to think about. And holiness, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of Elohim, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, wherein dwells righteousness. Hallelujah. Okay, and then in the book of Revelation, we see this. And I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heavens fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before Elohim. And the Sephirim were opened, and another Sephir was opened, which is the Sephir of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the Sephirim according to their works. What? Here's John telling us that we're going to be judged when we look at the book of life in accordance with our works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Sheol delivered up the dead which were in them. And they were judged, every man according to their works. And death and Sheol were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the Sephir of life was cast into the lake of fire. And I saw a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, Yochanan, saw the holy city, renewed Yerushalayim, coming down from Elohim out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her man. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he will tabernacle with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them, and be their Elohim. And Elohim shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It is done. I am the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his Elohim, and he shall be my son. Amen. So in summary, my friends, we have heard that the separation of church and state, and by the way, if you've got questions, if you would post them up now in caps so I can see them, I would appreciate it. We have heard that the separation of church and state would be the best thing to stop religious wars that had so plagued Europe. Well, we had to go to a separation of church and state because there was too much bickering between the Quakers and the Protestants and the Puritans. And that became the bickering between the Mormons and the JWs and the Baptists and the Pentecostals and the blah, 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 blah. But it was only, we know now that all of the wars that in Europe were the vexation of Rome to assert itself over all the nations of Europe over and over and over again. It was only the freedom from Rome obtained by the people of the British Isles that brought forth the true fruit in Yahweh. The secular state has only brought with it Rome. So here we are, we form this country, and all of the colonies have a litmus test for any civil servant that has to swear to be a Protestant They could not be a Catholic. They had to be a Protestant. And this starts getting modified immediately as the deists and the secularists start arguing on behalf of what? Well, it turns out they were arguing on behalf of Rome, because now Rome has completely captured the United States, with 7 of the 9 oligarchs being registered representatives of the Church of Rome. That's just a fact. And so here we are. We tried to keep the separation of church and state, claiming that we had a secular government that revered a false god. You see, when you say there is no God governing our affairs, you've declared a different God. You declared a different God. You declared an idol. You declared paganism. You declared hedonism. You declared heathenism. You did not declare the true faith, because a people of faith are a people of faith, and Yahweh is their king. Yahweh is their lawgiver. Yahweh is their judge. And that judgment and kingdom and authority has been handed to Yahusha, who sits before us as the singular living king. And all authority in heaven and earth belongs to him. And our governance has a duty, a fiduciary duty, and a responsibility to be in accord with the will of Yahusha. And if you are not in that accord, you have no business being in office at all at any level. Now, I can tell you, with the publication of this video, everybody's going to be calling me a theocrat, some extremist that wants to impose theocracy on the nation. And I say to you that theocracy is required of us now. It's required, and I'm not going to impose it on the United States, because there is not going to be a United States to impose it on here in the very near future, because the United States is committing suicide. Why is it committing suicide? Because it is in compact with Sheol and has made a covenant with death. We now know that all the wars that were in Europe were the vexation of Rome to assert itself over all the nations of Europe. It was only the freedom from Rome obtained by the people of the British Isles that forced Roman control out of the country, that brought forth the movement that would lead to the creation of the United States and the standards by which we initially founded the state. The secular state that has been imposed since the creation of the US Constitution has only brought with it Rome. That's why we have a cupola over the Capitol, the pregnant womb of Ishtar. That's why we have an Egyptian obelisk in the middle of the Capitol, the phallus of Nimrod, right? And so Rome now controls the state, unwilling to declare itself a people of the true faith. There is but one king, one lawgiver, one judge, and all authority in heaven and on earth is subject to the dominion thereof. Let us therefore abandon the diseased secular state once and for all, and once again restore ourselves as a nation, as a society, as a people of the true living Elohim. Okay, and with that, we'll see if I get to some questions. Okay, all right. Okay, so Stephanie Crow asks, how long can you expect the delivery on the Millennium Sefer? Probably 2 days, 3 days. I know you're in California, so it won't take much longer for you to get it. Sherry Slama asks, Satan has but a short time. Any idea when that will end? Yeah, I think it's going to come to an end in 2024. But that's just me, and it's just my opinion, right? That's my opinion. Okay. All right, let's see. What else do we have? Okay, so here, William asked me, how's the weather up here in Alaska? Well, I'll tell you, today was about 70 degrees, absolutely clear blue skies. It's been clear blue skies for 2 months now, and it is beautiful. My wife and I sit out on the front porch, having a cup of coffee, enjoying the sun in the morning, and of course the sun later on in the afternoon, and then of course the sun later in the evening, and then of course the sun later on tonight. I mean, the truth is, last night, and it was pretty much daylight right on up through midnight, Okay, yeah. Hey, thanks, Mark. Okay, Debbie Johnson asks, Stephen, do you think all of these people in high places are members of the fallen Nephilim? They're devils turning people him to mock the Most High Yahweh. No, I don't think that. I think that most of the people in high places, though, are in obeisance to a fallen Nephilim and to other governing dark forces. I mean, it's very clear that they worship dark forces. I mean, when you have when, God, you know who they intend when they use the name God, is booed at the Democratic convention, when you have people who have been brainwashed in their brainwashing camps that we call universities are out beating a doll to death in celebration of the idea of I have the right to kill my child, you know that you have people that are not worshiping the creator of life and the bringer of life. They're worshiping something else. And that worship, by the way, is bringing death to them, because guess what? The one they worship is a liar, is an accuser, is a stealer, and is a murderer. That's what he does. So do not be surprised when that comes, right? Okay, let's see. What else do we have here? Yeah, the death cult. Yeah, Cheryl Jackson mentions death cult. Yeah, just like their father. Yeah, they steal, kill, and destroy. That's it. Okay, so ZC asks, how do I feel about the monkeypox outbreak? Okay, well, the monkeypox outbreak is a very interesting outbreak because the monkeypox outbreak is, again, it appears to be weaponized and it appears to be transported, and they're trying to get it started and going in Europe. Now, from what I understand, 7 nations in Europe have already reported cases of it, but I don't trust anything these guys say. They reported COVID cases in Washington in January or February of 2020, which was just a flat lie. They couldn't possibly have been COVID because they hadn't even identified the virus. They didn't even know what they were talking about. Oh, we think it might be COVID. Well, that's enough to shut down everybody and put everybody out of work. The same people that they're begging to turn a profit right now, who can no longer be in business because of their idiocy, because they trusted somebody in a white coat, right? Okay, so where monkeypox is concerned, look, monkeypox is one thing. Of course, Marburg is another thing. And of course, there's also derivations that are talking about various forms of, COVID still coming back and so forth. So, who knows? I don't know what's coming out of the labs. There could be anything, but I know that they haven't given up on the idea of using this as a population control technique, right? All right. Edith, we do not have a coupon code for the Sefer. You think I'd have a coupon code, given that, I'm the CEO over there. I might have a coupon code, but I don't. Yeah, I'm so far behind the 8 ball. No, I don't have a code. I can tell you though that if you get the package deal, you can get, or any order over 100 is going to give you free shipping, which, given the cost of FedEx nowadays, that's a pretty good bargain. So, you want to take advantage of that if you can. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. Yeah. Now, Beck Extern asked me to comment on the U.S. losing our sovereignty to the WHO. Now, a lot of people say, well, the WHO is not going to be an issue for sovereignty, but in fact, it is going to be an issue for sovereignty. And here's the reason why. The last article of the U.S. Constitution, which I believe is Article 6, it creates the Supremacy Clause. And the Supremacy Clause makes it very clear that the Constitution and treaties of the United States are binding law on the states, notwithstanding any state law to the contrary. And so this means that if the federal government enters into a treaty, it has as much force against the states as any provision of the U.S. Constitution. Now, there's already an agreement, a treaty, if you will, between the WHO and the United States. What they intend to do right now is to bypass Congress's approval of this gift of sovereignty and to do it by means of an amendment of an existing, already approved treaty. This means it will not require a Senate approval. This means you don't get a voice in it. This means that Joe Biden just merely needs to sign the amendment and it binds the United States. Now, it will give over the sovereign authority of all health decisions, which we found out that over the last 20 years have resulted in a medical dictatorship, allowing some guy in a white coat to say, oh, this is a pandemic when it isn't. This is going to make you really sick when it doesn't. If you don't lock down, it could kill anybody, which was a bald-faced lie. If you don't wear a mask all the time, it's going to kill you. If you don't take a snake bite, it's going to kill you. If you don't do this, that, the other thing, in our opinion, we're going to impose it upon you by force. We're going to criminalize you. We're going to put you in jail. We're going to shut down your business. We're going to fine you, sanction you, cast you out of society, force you out of society, and ban you from being able to travel, get on a plane, get on a bus, or whatever. Now, I want to recommend to you guys, if you haven't had the chance to see Dr. David Martin's latest interview where he points to the fact that this virus was created, in fact, in Canada at labs at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver by 3 entrepreneurs who then sold it. And it's an entrepreneurial venture that is being controlled by and are getting royalties from Moderna and others for the creation of this patented virus that's under the control of none other than Justin Trudeau. So the Nazi streak in Canada is now in full bloom, and they are the ones that hatched the egg. So just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. All right. So will I make again the journals for purchase again? Yeah, Jody, the journal, it's called Davraki. It is available. You can just simply write info@sephir.net, Davraki, and that journal is available for you. You can buy it right now. We do have it in stock. Okay, the journal Davraki. Okay, hey, thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. Okay, the monarchy is in Canada. What do you think of her visit? Well, I mean, the Queen right now is in a situation. Hi, Pauline. Good to see you again. The Queen right now is really in her declining years. And, she represents a very interesting time in British history because the empire ended under her father, George VI. In 1952, on his death, that was the end of the empire. And she has been kind of, let's call her a nurturing mother who has kind of created this cocoon society for the British people, bathed in this cocoon of the National Health Service, in this cocoon of, the BBC, and, basically a real soft place for people to live, supposedly. And it isn't really. It has a very harsh side to it. But this is what the Queen has done. Now, she's been there for 70 years, and I think we're reaching the closing years of her tenure. And when the Queen is gone, this is going to be the end of a 70-year famine in Britain, a famine of the word, a famine of the faith. We know that there are several elements that have been really disparaging, the things that have gone on at Balmoral, the things that have happened within her family, from Lord Mountbatten to Harry to Philip to other things that have gone on inside the family that is going to be very interesting for her. Now, the Queen coming into Canada, in the face of the Nazi leadership of, Prime Minister Castro and his Nazi friend Chrystia Freeland, we have, you've got real problems in Canada, real serious problems, but they're no more serious than they are in the United States. You have a criminal cabal running your country who's engaged in criminal activity, including premeditated murder. So we have to see what's going to happen. And I don't know if the Queen has any authority anymore to even say, hey, you guys have to stop this. Because, this idea of trying to pick a fight with Russia, Canada's in on it, Britain's in on it, France is in on it, the US is in on it. And, if you keep punching those guys in the face, they're going to punch back. I mean, that's what's going to happen. Okay. All right. Let's see. Thank you, Pauline, for that question. I really appreciate that. Okay. Yeah. Rob, great statement, brother. They're trying to throw the whole zoo at us. Then comes the line of the tribe of Judah. Yeah. Ain't that the truth, right? Okay. Now, so Demuke Oratang asks the question, is Elon Musk the little horn speaking great things? Demuke, I got to tell you, Elon Musk is a very interesting character right now in terms of how he's factoring, what he's doing. And I can't put my finger on who Elon Musk is right now. On one hand, Elon Musk is leading us into AGI and a world of techno-fascism and social credit scores. On the other hand, he is trying to restore free speech on Twitter and trying to denounce the current regime. But, it's very interesting. He bought Twitter, and they immediately found out that half of Biden's Twitter accounts are fake, right? I've got all these people following me, except I don't, right? All right. So Robin L.E. asks, how do I locate a group to attach myself to and my son to? I'm moving to Georgia. Okay, so Robin L.E., you need to go to the Telegram group, Sefer Shabbat Group, and, go get on Telegram and look. And if you can't find it there, then go to sephiracademy.net, and we have instruction as to how to get on the Telegram group. And there are groups that have been formed where you can contact each other on Telegram, and you'll find a group that's near you in Georgia, right? Okay, Michaela Gavril says, fraud vitiates everything. Whatever Biden signs, Jean signs, is null and void. Well, I'll tell you there, Michaela, you're right that fraud vitiates everything, except that the corrupt judiciary in the United States no longer recognizes that doctrine. Well, that's what it used to be. But, if you didn't claim it in the first 5 seconds that you opened your mouth, then you're blocked by the statute of limitations, or there's some technical reason why you're no longer allowed to bring up the idea of fraud. So just don't even bring it up, because you're going to try to bring up the common law. And even though the common law is binding pursuant to the Constitution, we don't recognize it because we don't recognize stuff that we don't like. And we don't prosecute stuff that we don't like. And we don't have crimes that we don't like. We've got a criminal code for you and not for us. That's the way it is. I mean, if any one of us were to say the kinds of things that people are saying on the left about burning down the Supreme Court and going after their homes, we would be, with the January 6th defendants awaiting an indictment after a year. But on the left, that's not a chargeable offense. Burning down Portland, attacking a federal building, trying to burn down a courthouse, that's not an offense. That's free speech if it's on the left. I thought you guys knew that, right? Okay, let's see what else we see here. What should the Kodashim expect next? Okay. Well, hold on. Let me get to Susan. Susan, let's see. We got a couple other questions I missed out here. Okay. So we have a question here that is a good question. Sherry H. What is my opinion of the name Ahaya? Well, Ahaya. Now I've written about this. If you get a chance to check the blogs on Sephard.net, you'll see that I have written about this. It's very interesting. That passage. It does not say this is my name. It says this is who you should tell them sent you. And the difference with the Ahaya, if you understand the Hebrew, you understand that the Aleph is a prefix and the He is a prefix, and the word there is Yah. Yah, Asher, Yah. Aha are two prefixes leading into that word. Again, this is part of rightly dividing the Ivrit. And if you don't rightly divide the Ivrit, and you don't know the prefixes, and you don't know what they mean, and where they're going to, then you can get misled into thinking, oh, well, this is the name Ahaya, when it's very clear, and it says in 7,000 places that his name is Yahweh. Okay, not Ahaya. But people want to take the name Ahaya and they want to exploit it because that's the way they read it. But it really, there's a lot in that phrase, Ahaya, Asher, Ahaya. Like, for instance, that all three words begin with an aleph. That has its own implications too, right? And again, there's just so much in that I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, Sherry, see if you can find my blog on that. Okay, I've never read planets in the word. Are they just stars? Well, we talk about planets and the stars, of course. When the scriptures were written, there were no telescopes. And so what do we know about the world? What do we know about the cosmos? We didn't know a lot. We just kind of viewed it and saw the patterns of how they moved. So the fact that the planets are not named, but that they would be named by Romans and so forth, those names are probably misconstrued. But actually, no, there is reference to the planets because at that time they believed there were 7 planets, and they discussed those and their ramifications to theology. And there's a whole bunch in that too, Vanna, that I can't get into today, but there is a great deal of discussion about the planets and how they relate to theology. And I'll just have to spend more time on it. Okay. Then I can give you a better answer. Okay. So Susan Bailey asks, what should we do to protect our financial assets to weather the coming days? Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Well, it's very interesting because, we got this bounce going on between Bitcoin and the dollar, as to which one's going to hit the floor first. And it's like two basketballs being tossed across the gymnasium. They're going boom, 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 boom. But as they go, it's boom, 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 boom. And I think both are headed for the dustbin. You want to know my opinion. And then the question is, can you do anything with gold and silver? Well, not really. In fact, they say that when we get down to it, you're not going to be able to eat silver. So what you should do is, when you're talking about protecting your assets, I don't know what to tell you because I don't know what your assets are, Susan, number one. Number two, I'm not a financial advisor. I can tell you, if you're in a bunch of real estate, you've got some real issues you have to look at because the housing bubble's about to burst. If you're in a cryptocurrency, you got some real issues because there's been a complete crash in cryptocurrency. If you've got a lot of money in your 401k and you're watching that money just go right downhill, you're loss. Here it comes. Your retirement account is being wiped out, and the market, by the way, has just begun to correct. So if you really want to be financially secure, the best way to be financially secure is to create your own currency and then go ahead and inflate it, while you're running some money through an NGO that you can put in your pocket tax-free. I mean, that's how the elite do it, but you're not going to be able to do that because it's against the law for you to do that. You have to be in Congress to be able to do that, right? So, what can you do to protect your financial assets? Well, one of the things you can do is, you can consider commodities that can be resold is one thing you can consider. And again, this is not financial advice, but you could consider commodities that can be resold. You can also invest in commodity type enterprises, right? Which, I'm not quite sure what that would be in your case, but it's something you want to look to hard assets is what I'm telling you. And hard assets that are other than real estate in the United States, because real estate in the United States is overvalued probably 7,000 to 8,000%. So, something to think about. Okay. All right. Then Mike Dagg asks, when will it be time to have another violent overthrow of this outlandish American government? Well, I don't believe, okay, now I hear you here, Mike, but I'll tell you, I don't believe there's going to be a revolution or an overthrow of the United States government. And if, for instance, there may not be a nuclear strike by Russia against the United States government. Russia may sit back and just go, okay, these guys are on they're in a car doing 140 miles an hour heading for the Grand Canyon. So why should we get in their way with a nuclear weapon, right? Just let them go off the road. I mean, by the time we get to this coming fall, when the existing people in power are going to try to, fix an election again, which is what they're trying to do right now, when they, unleash their communist violent minions in the street, which they did in 2020, called Antifa. And some of that, by the way, was coordinated out of the White House in Zoom meetings that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and AOC participated in, talking about the violence they were going to use against the White House, against Washington, D.C., in which people were going to get arrested and so on and so forth. All of this stuff is planned, and they plan to do it again. And so when you talk about this revolution against the American government, there isn't going to be a revolution. The American government is going to collapse, as did the Soviet Union. It's just going to go poof. One day it's there, the next it's not. When you give your sovereignty to the WHO, then what's the point of us paying you any money? You're not making the decision anyway. It's like Russia, why should we negotiate with Ukraine? Ukraine isn't making the decisions. The decisions are all being made by the United States at NATO headquarters. It's not being made by Zelensky. Zelensky's just a clown who's standing there at the cash register laundering the money and putting a big chunk of it in his own pocket. That's all Zelensky amounts to. So, I mean, what's the point? What's the point of talking to Zelensky or anybody in Kiev? They're not making any decisions. And it's the same thing. Once the government gives its sovereignty to the WHO, what's the point of Congress? What's the point of having a president? What's the point of any of that? The real runners of the country are going to be over there in some scientific community, unelected scientific community. So what are you talking about revolution? There ain't going to be a revolution. What's going to happen is you're going to see the nation is going to completely reform politically. And this is already underway. When the Supreme Court came out and said, we're going to put out a decision that's going to overturn Roe versus Wade, what they're saying is they're not going to criminalize abortion. What they're saying is that the states are going to be the ones handling the abortion issue, not the federal government. So a state like Oklahoma can say there's no abortion allowed, but a state like California can say you can abort up until after the baby's smiling at mom, right? But I can tell you that once that takes place and you have a whole bunch of states that are going to say, we're sick and tired of your federal yoke telling us to kill our children, we're not going to do it anymore. And these states are going to move quickly to criminalize this idea of abortion, to no longer make it legal. But then you're going to have states on the West Coast and on the East Coast that are going to be, oh yeah, our abortion is good for up to 28 days after the baby is born. That is going to make citizens of California absolutely anathema to citizens of Oklahoma. That is to say, when someone in Oklahoma finds out you're from California, you're probably going to get shot and left in a dumpster somewhere that night. I mean, that's probably what's going to happen. So what you're going to see is you're going to see this disparity between ideologies where you have this, far progressive left, Yah-hating, progressive, diversified disintegration, defilement, desecration that they call their social order. That's going to be practiced on the extreme coasts and in other hotbeds of liberalism in the country. And then the rest of the country is going to move into a completely different political sphere. And those two are going to be completely incompatible with one another. And given that the federal government has given up sovereignty to a scientific organization, there isn't going to be anything more to talk about in terms of America. There's going to be only a discussion about what do we form as a nation state that will allow us to live the way we expect to live the best we can. And I think there's a movement in America that is going to be a group of people saying, we need to become a righteous people. We need to become a holy people. We need to become a reverent people. We need to be the people we used to be. And we need to ditch all this garbage and get back to being that. And I think there's going to be a huge push to that. And the people that don't want any part of that are going to be free to start their own nation states on the coasts for as long as they can pull it together. And I'll guarantee you that given their philosophy, they will be dead broke, completely bankrupted, and invaded by foreign powers in less than a decade. Okay, so what should the Kodashim expect next? Well, here's the thing is that, and I'll speak with you guys very candidly on this. You know, I do a show on Tuesday mornings with Shel Wagner called Living Through Interesting Times, where we talk about this stuff more in detail on Lamb TV. And I do a show following that with Jessica Knock called Eating Wild Locust and Honey. And we also discuss these things. Jessica and I are going to be doing a particular show that's going to be volatile, would be one way of putting it, with Scott Bennett tomorrow. And this is answers for questions that we're going to be doing again on Lamb Network. That's a show that's going to be worth seeing. It's definitely going to have a lot to it. But in answering the question, what should the Kodashim expect next? I mean, I'm just going to put it this way now. Russia has come out and said that they are pulling back from the notion that they're going to do any kind of preemptive nuclear launch. And so they have said that they're only going to use nuclear weapons if their existence is threatened. Now, the reason why they have said that is because they've realized that they can completely defeat NATO in a conventional war. They just captured some of the top NATO leadership at the Azovstal industrial plant in Mariupol. And this is a huge surrender on the part of the Ukrainian vanguard troops, who were all neo-Nazis, being trained in this neo-Nazism, which this extreme decadence that is neo-Nazism, by these leaders from Canada, France, America, and Britain. And these names are going to be announced in the Russian press here in the next few days as to who was who. But the fact is that the Russians have come in. We have committed armament like you wouldn't believe into Ukraine. We've committed, Javelin missiles and anti-ship missiles and anti-aircraft and aircraft and everything else you could imagine into Ukraine in the billions of dollars. And in fact, Joe Biden just approved another $100 million worth of weapons to be dropped into Ukraine. Well, whenever we drop those weapons into Ukraine, the Russians blow them up the first day they're there. They just get hit and smacked. And now the Russians have introduced something. They introduced a very powerful laser that is capable of taking down a satellite at 1,500 kilometers in space. So if there's a satellite orbiting over Ukraine, this laser is capable of blowing it out of the air. And if you recall, Elon Musk did put an entire 5G system in orbit over Ukraine so that they could have communication. So I don't know if that's going to be a target or not, but it could be. But the fact is that Russia has demonstrated, first of all, they were able to take on a much larger army than the army they had when they entered the country, and they have defeated that army. And they have defeated that army using typical Russian, Stalingrad type tactics that have worked very effectively for the Russians and very ineffectively for the Ukrainians, who were supposed to be smart and gifted with billions of dollars of NATO weaponry and billions, and the top NATO trainers in the world being present on the ground with them. And they still got their head handed to them in a conventional battle. And what this tells Moscow is that their engineers are more advanced than the Western engineers, and that their military tactics are by far superior to Western military tactics, and that they're going to be capable of waging a conventional war against NATO, especially given the kind of anemic response that NATO has mustered in both Poland and in Romania. and in the Baltics for that matter. So Finland capitulating to the pressure from the U.S. to join NATO, and Sweden capitulating to the West to join NATO, have basically sealed their fate. They're going to be engaged in the same suicidal economic financial hardship that the rest of the West is engaged in. And the Russians look at this and say, hey, and I can tell you, there's something that's going to happen here in the very near future. This $40 billion bailout that's going to Ukraine, no bailout for Americans who are out of work, no bailout for the homeless in Portland, no bailout for the moms who don't have infant formula. None of that's happening. But we got $40 billion for Ukraine to make sure that Vladimir Zelensky puts another $2 or $3 billion in his own pocket before he flees the country to his $40 million mansion there in Miami, right? We got to make sure that all of that stuff is taken care of. All the NGOs are funded, all the defense contractors that need to rebuild all the munitions that have been blown up by the Russians, all that stuff gets funded. But that $40 billion payoff is going to be the justification in the minds of the US and Britain when all of the wheat that's currently stored in Ukraine is going to be stolen from Ukraine, as it was by the Nazis in 1941, as it was stolen before, prior to the revolution in 1917. So Ukraine's wheat is going to be stolen from Ukraine. I'm not quite sure how they're going to get it out of the country yet, but they're going to move it. They're going to get that wheat out of Ukraine, and they're going to get it into Western Europe, because if they don't, Western Europe goes into a famine. Now, Western Europe doesn't have to be in the condition it's in right now. It doesn't have to have natural gas prices through the roof, or heating oil through the roof, or food prices going through the roof. It doesn't have to. But the West is committing suicide because we have financial leaders that can't say no to the demented individuals in the United States who are so busy covering up their own crimes and engaged in looting and pilfering of the United States to put in their own pockets, that they can't take one moment off to see the kind of harm they're doing. And so as a result, it would be very easy to stop the financial crisis in Britain, stop sanctioning Russia. It'd be very easy to stop the escalating price of natural gas and oil, stop sanctioning Russia. It's that simple. And all of a sudden, things go back to normal, or not completely normal because we still have a drought going on, not completely normal because we still have the collapse of the West going on, but it would mitigate it, it would slow it down, and people wouldn't starve to death. So what can the Kodashim expect? Well, my expectation is that we've got people that are nuts in DC. I mean, they're nuts. And so who knows what they're going to do? I mean, there are many people, particularly what they call the neocons, the war hawks, who want to, scratch their groin and launch something at Russia. If any one of them ever gets their way to put tactical nuclear weapons in Finland, or to launch some kind of nuclear strike into Ukraine against Russian forces, then it's going to be a complete nuclear holocaust. So if there is any preemptive launch by France, by Canada, by the UK or the United States against Russia with any form of a nuclear weapon, then the UK will completely disappear, and most of the eastern seaboard of the United States will completely disappear. And that will all happen within 10 minutes. If this is not the case, if we can get any reasonable minds to prevail at any level, which at this time right now, it's highly unlikely. It's very, very unlikely that there is going to be any reasonable mind at the table at all between now and November. It's just unlikely. So you have to look for what is going to be the next thing involved. Now, what's been talked about being on the table is, and we're talking about today's the 19th, there's discussion that on the 22nd, Ukraine has given permission for its borders to be opened for Polish troops with an accompanying U.S. contingent and Romanian troops with an accompanying U.S. contingent to enter into Ukraine. And they'll be entering into Western Ukraine if this story is true. Now, if this story is true and these forces enter into Ukraine, they can expect to be met with a massive Russian onslaught of missiles, lasers, artillery, hypersonic missiles, etc., that it's going to be a massive onslaught against their invasion, their weaponry, their troops, and their supply chains. That's what you can expect. Now, depending on what happens, when Russian troops begin shooting directly at American troops, and American troops are using our finest weaponry and munitions against the Russians to see how they're going to fly, and there starts to be a great deal of collateral damage, and Americans begin responding by putting munitions into Russian territory, then it's very likely to quickly escalate into a nuclear salvo. It could escalate very quickly into a nuclear salvo. Now, in the event of a nuclear salvo, I hope I'm not going down a path here that's ridiculous and you guys are finding me boring or not, but I'm going to try to go ahead and finish talking about this, because when we talk about this idea of this nuclear salvo, you're talking about some very difficult things, because you're talking about, the way it stands right now, the Russians have 2 Sarmat 2s already fully loaded and on the tarmac ready to be launched. Sarmat 2 can reach the United Kingdom in 202 seconds. It's 8 minutes to reach the United States. And these things would be, massively destructive. I can't begin to tell you how destructive they were going to be. They'd be massively destructive. And of course, the Russians also, just in case you're wondering about what to expect, the Russians have moved and have just deployed throughout Moscow. They've deployed their S-500 systems. Now, the S-500 is the most advanced anti-missile system in the world. And it has the capability also of reaching satellites in space, but it has the capability of taking down slow-moving missiles. And many of the missiles that would be coming into Moscow, whether they be fired from a French submarine or from a British submarine or from an American ICBM, these missiles are slow-moving compared to the Russian missiles. The Russian missiles move at between 8 and 13,000 miles an hour. American missiles are under 2,000 miles an hour. And so they're going to be targets. They're going to be ready targets for these various anti-missile systems that Russia has begun deploying. So you see that Russia intends to preserve its capital, and they have put in these anti-ballistic missile systems that they believe are capable of doing a lion's job, if you will, over this attack. So, and you're talking about a finite number. When you talk about U.S. nuclear capability, the U.S. nuclear capability is expressed in our submarines, right, which is a pretty good capability with the Trident MIRV system. And then you also have, nuclear weapons that can be carried by B-52 bombers or by B-1 bombers that can carry a certain payload of nuclear weapons. And of course, we have our ICBMs, but our ICBMs are ancient technology, which may or may not work. We haven't even tried one. We haven't even tested them since 1992. Our silos in the United States operate on a 5-inch floppy disk drive, if that gives you an idea how old the technology is. And again, we have done no serious nuclear testing since 92. So we don't know what the condition of our arsenal is. We believe it's still effective. We believe it's still going to work, but we don't know. And so when you're talking about the arsenal, it depends on what goes down and who makes what decision what, because it's a certainty that the Russian missiles are going to arrive at the United States much sooner than the US missiles are going to arrive in Russia. That's a certainty. That's a certainty. So what can we expect? We can expect that, I would say, over this weekend, you need to be conscientious about what you're doing and pray concerning what's happening, because this weekend could be a weekend of volatility. I point out to you, for those that know anything about, scripture and its latent meaning, we have 5/22/22, right? And 5, of course, is the number of points on the Star of Baphomet, the satanic pentagram, which our Pentagon is built after, which the White House sits at the base of a pentagram in Washington, D.C. This 5/22, we have this idea of the satanic impulse over 22, over the 22 letters of the Ivrit. It gives you something to ponder. So anyway, we'll just keep that in mind. So what the Kodashim should expect is this. You're going to see a massive financial downturn in the United States. If we had reasonable people going on right now, we could mitigate a lot of this damage. We could cause the price of oil to reduce dramatically in a very short order. For instance, let's say we had somebody who had a reasonable brain, somebody who wasn't demented and who wasn't a crook taking kickbacks. Of course, what you would do is you would immediately open all natural gas production and all oil production in the United States, finding even the most marginal leases to make them available and to put incentives behind developing that stuff immediately. The next thing you might do is talk about toning down the sanctions on Russia substantially to allow for Russian wheat to be exported, Russian soy to be exported, Russian nickel, Russian cadmium, Russian lithium, et cetera, Russian ammonium to be exported, that we might be able to get fertilizer and stuff for the crops. But if you wait until July, trying to get fertilizer in July is going to be irrelevant. We should have it right now, and we're not getting it. Okay, so because of this, anytime, any day that goes by that we don't have reasonable leadership in place, you have to make a decision as to how you're going to eat come this next year, because recognize that there is a concerted attack against food in this country. And so you need to consider how you're going to eat next year. It's something to think about, something each person needs to think about. Now, if you've joined Shell and I on Living Through Interesting Times, you'll get some gardening tips as well as our discussion of the interesting times. Yeah, exactly. Okay, now, ZC, don't ever ask a tough question like that again. That one really loaded me up there. No, great question. Thank you, ZC. Okay, let's see. Yeah, and for those of you, I'll tell you, if you subscribe to the channel, you get noticed. Now, I got to tell you that I'm a little bit slow in terms of getting everything loaded up, but usually we start here at 5 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday evening. That's when we usually start here. If you subscribe, you can comment. If you don't subscribe, you can't comment. Okay. All right, you guys. So with that, I'm going to wrap up our discussion tonight on the king, the lawgiver, and the judge. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll come and visit us at Sefer.net, www.sefer.net. You can visit me at Sefer Academy as well. You can study the Hebrew for beginners at Sefer Academy. You can study the Odiot with Shel Wagner. You can study the Matzerot with John Austin Reed. We're going to be developing a new program on history coming up on August 1st. You might enjoy that as well. So please come and join us. Jessica Knox programs on Tuesday and Friday, also on Lamb TV. We really appreciate you guys. And by the way, if you're looking for a playlist as to all my videos, go to the Sefer channel, Sefer Publishing Group. And Penny Castro has set out a huge playlist of all the stuff we've done here. And you can catch up on everything. And if you go to the website, you'll find that we have a lot of blogs with videos and so on and so forth that you'll find that can be very, very illustrative and help you understand where we're going. Remember to contact us on the Telegram page, Sefer Shabbat group on the Telegram page for finding fellowship in your neighborhood. Okay. All right, you guys. And I forgot, I almost left out John Kalb's show. John Kalb is also doing a show on Lamb TV. I believe it's on Mondays. Wait a minute. Is this somebody who's calling himself Proud Birther? All right. We got the right guy at the right place. All right. Yeah. EMP would lead to another nuke retaliation. Yeah, you're right. EMP is another one. Also false flags, right? Any kind of a cyber hack attack could also lead to this. Yeah, lots of stuff there. Okay, guys. So anyway, just want you to know I'm so thankful you're here watching these videos, and that and I'd appreciate it if you'd share them as much as you can, and maybe we can get the community to continue to go and to continue to be blessed. Okay, thank you so much. B'Shem Yosha. We're so thankful, and I will lift up his name to you now in the name of Yahweh Tsebaot. I will see you again next week.